I love my Yamaha blue paint, even if it is basically just on the tank. However, it's a bit rough at the moment. That's definitely not how a beautiful bike deserves to be treated. So today, I'm going to show you how I went from that bone-chilling noise back to the silky smooth paint Yamaha intended, with a bit more depth and shine, all with this chunk of clay. Blue tack? Eraser? Who knows? But nevertheless, it worked. So this really is the current state of my bike's paint, and I'm not proud to admit it. However, I can swiftly pass the blame on to the previous owner because I'm definitely not grown up enough to take responsibility for my own actions. But in all seriousness, I bought this bike secondhand just over a month ago, and the previous owner forced it to sleep outside and not in a nice warm garage for some reason. It was under a carport, so it could be a lot worse, but the sides were still uncovered, unprotected, which means all types of weather conditions could be blown in. So every time there was a slight breeze, dust, rain, whatever was around could be blown onto the bike. And over time that gradually builds up, contaminates the paint, and ends up feeling like this. It was frequently washed. I mean, it's a very clean bike, but even periodic washes can't undo the damage if it sleeps outside for months on end. But that's okay, because I think we can fix it relatively easily. This is a clay bar kit. Lots of different companies make them, but they all basically consist of the same things. A bar of clay, a detailing spray to act as a lubricant, and a microfiber cloth. Hence why this shouldn't be too tough. The concept behind this is that as you slide the clay over your paint, it can grab onto any tiny contaminants that are nestled into your paint and take them with it, leaving your paint as smooth as can be. Kind of like when you drop a sucker on the floor and everything sticks to it, but that dirt is no longer on the floor. Getting rid of these contaminants will also reduce the chance of scratching your paint during future washes and general riding. So considering a kit like this starts at about $20, there's really no reason not to do it if your paint is feeling slightly rough. For today's task, I'm actually lucky to have a naked bike because I can literally point to all the painted areas on my bike from this one spot, because there are only about 5 of them. The biggest and most important is obviously the tank. Then we have these little painted covers on the tail. My favorite are these colored accents underneath the headlights, obviously the shrouds on the radiator, and the worst part I suspect will be the mudguard, because it's so close to the road and so close to the brakes that are constantly shedding brake dust, which is known to contaminate paint. If you have a superbike covered in fairings, it might take a tad longer, but the same process will apply. You can clay bar any painted surfaces, as well as headlights, taillights and windscreens, all of which will make a considerable difference. First, I started with a general bike wash, since I got caught in the rain the other day and my bike is filthy. But if you're in a rush, just make sure that the areas you're going to clay bar are clean, so you don't drag dirt around the paint and scratch it while trying to make things better. Then I could bring the bike back into my workshop, where I'd have a clean environment to do this. One bar of clay will be able to do an entire car, if not a couple. So all we'll really need for a bike is a little piece broken off. Knead that piece of clay into a flat disc so that it has a bigger surface area and so it's easier to hold onto. Because if you drop it on the ground, everything will stick to it and it will have to be thrown away. Next, we need to lubricate the paint, either with the spray lubricant your kit came with, or just a soapy water mix will do the same thing. We just want to make the clay easier to slide across the paint without sticking. Now it's time for the strange part, rubbing clay up and down your paint. Stick to up and down movements or back and forth, but avoid circles to reduce the chance of scratching your paint if there's a contaminant stuck in the clay. It is a strange feeling. At first, you'll feel that the paint starts off rough, but after a few strokes, it should gradually get smoother as contaminants are lifted. You might even be able to hear it in extreme cases. Mine wasn't as bad as I expected. The clay wasn't looking dirty and it only had a few tiny visible contaminants stuck in the clay. But nevertheless, every so often, fold the clay over itself and then knead it back into shape to work the contaminants into the clay and keep fresh clay in contact with your paint. And if it starts to stick to the paint, give it another spray or two with your lubricant to keep things sliding smoothly. Once you've clay barred the entire piece you're working on, dry the surface with your microfiber cloth and give it another feel to see if it did the trick or not. That really is so much better. It's smooth as glass now, and I'm glad I had a clay bar kit in the cupboard and didn't throw it out all those years ago. I knew it would come in handy at some point, and I don't think I'm going to get tired of doing this to my paint now. The tank was my biggest concern, as that's the biggest and prettiest piece on my bike. But since I was already doing it, I gave all my other painted parts and lights a quick pass as well. The mudguard was probably in the worst shape as expected, being so close to the road and brakes. But since it's painted black and flies under the radar, I've never stopped to feel it up to see if it was rough or not. And finally, there is one more thing we need to do before we can get back to riding. Now that the paint is clean and smooth, we need to protect it with a layer of wax or polish. After all, there's really no point in clay barring if you're not going to look after the paint. So a layer of wax is important to help fight off new contaminants on your next rides. And about 45 minutes later from start to finish, my paint feels significantly better and has lost that frosted dull look that I didn't even realize it had, and more importantly, sounds less like fingernails on a chalkboard. This process doesn't cost much. It's a great thing to have in the cupboard for when you need it like I did, and really doesn't take much effort. So if you or the previous owner have neglected your bike, there's really no reason not to clay bar it. Well, I am very glad that I could correct that relatively easily, and I can safely say that it will never get that bad again, at least not under my watch. However, this isn't something that you want to do every single time you wash your bike, because it can be just as harmful as it can be good if it is overdone. However, in extreme circumstances, or perhaps every few years, it is very worthwhile doing. But anyway, let me know when last your bike's paint got some TLC. And hit the like button if this video motivated you to give your paint some love. And I'll see you on the next ride.